wait on old people to follow, to lead us, that it was incumbent upon youth to take the responsibility and to move forward. And having people around like Dave Dennis and Hollis and, so at the time, Annie Devine was living here. And Fannie Lou Hamer came to the room, Yanita Blackwell, and all of those folks and others who were still around developing in us the leadership capacity to go beyond the sit-ins and the bus rides. That the issues that we were going to have to deal with were so institutionalized and so deeply embedded that it would take a sustained movement. So I would say that the greatest impact for us, my age group, from the Freedom Rides and from what you kicked off, was that young people weren't scared. Now we went through, we shut Tupelo down a couple of times, and the kids were killed at Jackson State, but I think a lot of things changed. I think the script got switched somewhat in terms of the involvement of the youth in the movement. And it continues as we go forward. Now, in our work, we engaged in two fields of work that are directly related to what you did. One is something called the Southern Rural Black Women's Initiative for Economic and Social Justice. And it's a group of black women, and we say Winifred Green is Sarah Balroy Williams. We have one Jewish woman and one white woman, so it's a Southern Rural Black women and Winifred and Sarah have formed this work in the Black Belt of Alabama and Georgia and the Delta and Mississippi, working with Southern Rural Black women on issues that impact them and their families. Southern Rural Black women continue to be the most maligned group of people in the country. They don't want anything. They want to be on welfare. They have all of these children. They don't want anything for the children. And they've gotten all of this money from the government and nothing's changed. Well, number one, they've not gotten all this money from the government. And the systems that they have to traverse are just as treacherous in some ways. Now, the organizers for the Southern Rural Black Women's Initiative I'm in Mississippi. There's a woman named Sophia Bracey Harris who runs the Federation of Community Controlled Child Care Centers in Alabama, based in Montgomery. It's been organizing black daycare operators in the state of Alabama for the past 40 years. Grew out of the Civil Rights Movement. Integrated schools after the Freedom Rides. Family was run out of town, house burned down. And of course, the third person who helped to form SRBWI is Shirley Sherrod and the Southwest Georgia Project in Albany, Georgia, anchors our work in Georgia. The other piece of work that I want to talk about is the Children's Defense Funds. And also as part of SRBWI, we have a leadership training program for young black women called the Yanita Blackwell Young Women's Leadership Institute that takes place every summer for 5 days at Tupelo College. And at the end of June, at the end of the session this June, we will have trained over 700 young black women from across these 3 states and these rural areas. Hollis Watkins has done a lot with us in both training our women and training us, continuing to train our staffs and all of that. The other piece of work is around youth leadership development in a broader sense. I don't know how many of you know that CDF for the last 15 years has been operating freedom schools across the country with college interns serving children that are kindergarten to 6 years old. It's 1 college student for every 10 K-6 grade child. That program is run by a brilliant woman whose name is Dr. Jean Middleton Harrison, who is also a student of you all. young people, those interns who come through training at the former Alex Haley Farm outside of Clinton, Tennessee, which we invite you to come and visit with us. And we have something called the Samuel Proctor Ministers Institute, but it's not just for ministers. Every summer, the third week of July, it is a beautiful site, a site that needs to continue to be built as a training ground for creating more freedom riders. Hollis again has done a lot of training. I think Dave's been out there. Bob Moses. I think that Gene has reached out to members of the Freedom Riders group to come and talk to the young people. And then finally, we're embarking upon something called the Young Adult Leaders Training Program. It's called YALT. Over the next 5 years, our intention is to train 5,000 young people to be leaders and advocates. It's driven by an advisory committee that has Bernard Lafayette on it and has Chuck McDough and just a number of people, Omo Moses, the youth side, a lot of young, T.E. Morris, Augustus' daughter. So I'm telling you all of this because I want you to know that when you talk about how the Freedom Riders impacted the movement, that you still have an impact. The film, The Freedom Riders, will be used in training. We use the Birmingham Children's March as training tools. We are looking for great curriculum in terms of reading materials and other things. We're looking for great faculty to come in and do the training with these young people. So I'm here both to say thank you to you, but to say also that we have great fear that if we don't recreate ourselves, you created me and a lot of other young people. We have to create some other young people because we think we're in probably one of the most dangerous times that we've ever been in, both in our community and in our country. Yes. And this thing about, we talk about reconciliation, and we should talk about reconciliation, and we should move reconciliation as far as we can move it. But we have to recognize that everybody's not reconciled. That when Barack Obama got elected president, and I woke up in my house in Madison, Mississippi, because I won't just let them have it. They got Madison County's my home, it's not theirs. But when I woke up in Madison County, and I had been talking to my children the night before, and I thought about the environments they were getting ready to go into, their work environments, and there was such a pall over the state that I had to call them and say to them, do not go into those work environments too jubilant today. You go and you pay attention to how people react to you. And then we talked about that afterwards. There is a note, and this Take My Country Back, and all of that, racism is not dead. It's far from dead. I had a grandchild in public school in Madison County, and they were Black History Week talking about slavery. And one of the young white girls said, "Oh, that wasn't so bad." And the teacher said, "Well, no, it wasn't all that bad." Well, of course, it was my granddaughter. So they got another lesson about what was bad and what wasn't. But this whole thing about ideology versus race, you could say that the fact that, and I had this argument at the fairground, when a group of us from Tougaloo and a group of white students from Millsaps had this racial reconciliation movement at Millsaps. was a very old white woman in that booth. And I engaged her in conversation. I asked her, what do you see wrong with me? And the police surrounded us, but the woman kept talking. We were having a conversation. And I came to realize this lady started pointing out to me in the Bible all of the places where races were supposed to be kept separate and where we were relegated to being servants. And then, and I said something about, I did kind of have to get out of there. Something about slaves being brought over to this country, and she said, darling, we didn't do that to you. I said, well, who did? She said, the Jews did. Now, the thing about that story that struck me more than anything as I walked away from that was that this woman believed that to her core. It was taught in her church. Now, you could say that was ideology. You could say that wasn't racism. That was her belief system. So all of this stuff about we don't have to, we'll just disagree. And I'll end with this house. I know I said that. Back in 1979, at that time I was working for a group called the Children's Foundation, and other place I worked in life. My very first job was with the American Friends Service Committee. So I was put by these experiences into a tone that kept me grounded in the movement and in where my heart and my passion is today. But back in 1979, I worked for the Children's Foundation, and we worked on federal food programs. And the implementation of the school breakfast program came up. I was working on a regional level and talking to the folks at USDA regionally about how the southern states always work south, and I always work back to the same people in the same communities that you worked with that came out in 1961 and 1966. It was always that same core group of people in those communities that moved things forward. But I said I was at a state government, a state Department of Education meeting with the USDA representatives, and I was there as an observer. But the folks were very, open about what they were going to do. So I said, I'm sitting around the table with this school food official from Kentucky, 1979. And they were talking about the program, and I said, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to do whatever they make Mississippi and Alabama do. Now, if they don't make Mississippi and Alabama do it, we're not doing it. So it's still clear, whatever they make Mississippi